Anyway, hello, everybody. We are going to have a really interesting meeting today, partly focused on the idea of getting out the youth vote. And we have a guest speaker, Zev Shapiro, who's going to be talking to us. He is part of, he started a group called TurnUp, and he will tell us all about that. Jim will be giving us an update on various doings that we've been involved in. So you'll have that information as well. This is not a fundraiser. This is our monthly meeting, but we are going to be raising some money for Zev's organization. So along the way, you'll see a donation link in the chat. We're not going to be, it's not going to be pushing it in the way we do for a fundraiser, but we want to support his group, and we're going to be doing our best for him.
Now I'm going to shift to young voters and just show one thing I want to help people to understand is that when you're looking at the name of the game in the end is net votes, net Democratic votes, if you will. But you can actually break that down into three key parts. Now, this is not really mathematical, but it is pretty strong conceptually. So you start with the percent that are actually registered. And then you have the percent of those that actually turn out. And then you also have the vote share. So mathematically, it's almost like an equation that you get to your, if you sort of set it up right. So, vote share, we're not really, we're doing like in canvassing, for example, to some extent, but campaigns work on that. But Zev, to his credit, is actually working very hard on both of these first two components. Because if you have a lot of people register, but they don't turn out or they don't vote for you, you're not, or you got them turn out, but you don't have many registered, that doesn't work very well either. And I showed this the last month ago, but just one time, it may look fairly subtle, but in fact, for both presidential elections and in midterms elections, the younger voters are actually turning out for us more than they did. This is turnout in the past. And also vote share is working well for us as well as in 2022. So what are we doing? Well, we're working with this group called TurnUp. Now, the one thing I want to make sure people understand, they're a 501c3. They're nonpartisan. We can be partisan. We can be as partisan as we like. And we can support them in our in ways that fulfill their objectives, but also fulfill our objectives. But the way they conduct themselves has to be in a nonpartisan way. And as as Lisa said, we are going to be raising money for them. We have an ActBlue site. There are also ways for people that use donor advised funds, or you might even have a foundation, and we can provide you with ways to do that as well. So here's the thing. There's so much that they're slated to be doing for us. So it's working in Virginia and Pennsylvania. So we're getting the current election, but we're also getting infrastructure building in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania has some elections too, but we're getting a twofer here in that sense. It's both high school and community colleges. So young people obviously are in schools. A lot are not in school, but four-year colleges are a target of a lot of people, but community colleges are actually sort of under-targeted, and there are ways to reach them. And they have a lot of students that are actually very sympathetic to our interests and what we want to happen. So this slide is actually very similar to a slide that Zev is going to show. But the reason I'm doing it is because it takes a while to sort of process it, and it's taken me a while to process it, because there's a whole bunch of different sort of interventions that they're proposing to do and that we will be helping them do. One is physical registration drives. There are also relational approaches, which is basically, again, social media, but you find peer use that reach out to their peers in their communities. There are also influencers out there in social media, like on TikTok and so forth, that they already are out there influencing people, and you can find out what they're saying but you can also help them to do a better job for doing recruitment and for turnout. And then there's also a paid digital component to it, which is similar to what we've done in the past with Chris Bachman. And you get all this for the incredibly low price of only $100,000 of tax deductible contribution. Now, I'm not saying every cell of these, we're not doing actually everything in everyone, but we're doing all these things in all these places. I think that takes us to Zev, and I've had a wonderful opportunity to work with him already, and I can tell you he's a great committed entrepreneur, I would say, in doing all this, but you'll hear that for yourselves. So I'll stop sharing and turn it over to you, Zev.
Thank you very much, Jim. And see whether the screen sharing was going to succeed. Can everybody see my screen? Great. Well, as Jim said, my name is Zev Shapiro, founder of TurnUp, and this is a presentation and sort of an overview of our work planned in the upcoming Virginia General Assembly elections, and then also in Pennsylvania for the elections that Jim discussed. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's wonderful to meet everybody here, and I've really had the opportunity to get to know Jim and Mary and Michael and others, and have really appreciated that opportunity. So thank you. So I'm a upcoming senior at Harvard College, and let me tell you a little bit about TurnUp. So just as a broad overview, we're a fully tax deductible nonprofit organization started in early 2020. Late 2019, early 2020. We did our first sort of electoral work in 2020 and have been active ever since. And we've been very successful at that. We're probably the largest youth-led registration and turnout group. We have been, at least in the past couple cycles. And we're also really important is our intergenerational relationships. We have been supported even by some people here from very early on. We really rely on the activism of other generations, and we're actually an intergenerational team. We work with folks of all ages to get out the youth vote. We think that's really important. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of how I got into this, when I was in 4th grade, I went to public school, a Title I school, and most of my friends would complain about school lunch. And I thought, well, maybe there's something I can do, because it seemed like an issue of equal access to healthy food. Most of my friends couldn't afford to bring lunch from home like I could, and so they had to eat food from school. So I created a petition for a salad bar at my school so that everybody would have that opportunity. And now there's one actually at every school where I grew up, and it's very popular. Even surprisingly, people actually really look for that. So then I got involved in politics. In 2012, I worked for Elizabeth Warren as a volunteer. I did canvassing, all that stuff, and a bunch of other campaigns. And then after the Parkland tragedy in 2018, most of my friends decided that they were very interested in activism for the first time. And that was very inspiring to me, because before that, my friends were not really interested in politics. And so I discovered that it turns out, and this is true based on a lot of the data, and I'll talk about it, most young people really want to get involved in civic engagement. They want to vote, they want to participate, but most of them don't really know how. It's not easy to do so. For instance, most high schools don't register students to vote. Mine didn't, for example. Only 30% of 18-year-olds are registered to vote. So it's really an issue of access. And so our goal at TurnUp is to increase the number of young people who actually participate, and to do that in a very targeted way, as Jim mentioned. So focusing very specifically on the places where if someone registers to vote and actually votes, their vote will make a big impact. So just to give you an idea of what the youth vote looks like today, in 2024, 44% of the electorate will be in Gen Z or millennials, and more than 4 million young people turn 18 every year, most of them not being registered to vote. But what's really interesting is if you look at the turnout data, and Jim showed some of that, but if you actually look at the youth turnout data as a percentage of young people who are registered, the vast majority of young people that are registered actually vote. And so in 2020, for example, it was 86%. In the past 6 years, it's been well over 70%. So what our goal is both registration and turnout, but with a particular focus on registration, because we know that young people want to vote. They're just oftentimes not registered, and particularly when they're in a sort of between 18 and 22. So The other point about that, which I think is important to mention, is that the right has invested very heavily in young voters for over 30 years. And so there was a recent study that shows that actually Republicans and the far right are spending 3 times over the last few years what Democrats have in terms of young voters. So there's a really big disadvantage on the spending side. Obviously, most young people are progressive, but that's not the case everywhere, and it may not be the case if there's not a significant investment. So I want to talk a little bit about some of our accomplishments as an organization. We've been doing a lot of work. We've registered now over 200,000 young voters lifetime through a lot of different programs that we've run. One in particular was earlier this spring, which is something that we're bringing into Virginia with your support, is we hire students to run high school voter registration drives. So we recruit them, we hire them, and then they run physical drives in their schools. We did this in the spring of this year. We registered just under 16,000 students to vote through that program. It was really successful, about $5.40 per registration. And so that's one of the things that I'll talk about later, but that's one of the programs that we're bringing into Virginia and Pennsylvania. Another flag I would make would be in relation to our grassroots organizing. And that is that we run an internship program for students. And I would actually say it's pretty similar to what you do at 31st Street, except that we'll run Zooms like this and everybody's in high school or college, but we'll be doing the same things. We'll be doing phone banking, we'll be doing text banking, we'll be doing physical canvassing. We recruit students through their high schools and colleges to join our internship program. We educate them on teams and then actually empower them to take action because they've become educated. And then we supervise their work, whether it's peer-to-peer organizing, voter registration drives, phone banking, text banking, and then we'll track all of our results. So we've actually graduated 4,000 students over the past 3 years from this program. We have just under 3,000 that will be in the program this year or have already been. And so that's something that we're very focused on, which is just grassroots organizing, similar to what you all do, but for the high school and college demographic specifically. So with that said, I would love to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing with 31st Street and our work particularly in Virginia and in Pennsylvania. So as Jim mentioned, we're focusing particularly on high schools within key districts and within key counties, as well as community colleges in those locations. And we have a number of different interventions that we use in order to register and turn out folks to vote, young people who matter. So number one is physical work. So we'll hire students to run physical registration drives. That would be in high schools and in community colleges. And we'll also hire students to do turnout efforts at community colleges. So handing out flyers, high traffic canvassing, other activities. We also run relational programs. So we'll hire students to contact their friends and folks that they know and remind them to register to vote. We'll also hire them to remind their friends to vote. We'll hire high school students, community college students, low propensity voters when it comes to turnout. And then we run influencer marketing programs. So we hyper select or target influencers of importance. Those influencers have a strong following in the key districts, and we hire them to show their followers how to vote, where their polling location is, how to vote early or early absentee. And basically, that's just sort of paying social media influencers. And then we run digital campaigns, which you may be more familiar with. And we focus on platforms that are underutilized, particularly on Snapchat, reminding young people to vote, showing them where to vote, how to vote, when to vote, and things like that. So that's sort of an overview of the types of programs that we're running. And I want to sort of give you a sense of how each one of them generally works. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll identify target priorities for registration and turnout. So that could be digitally identifying those young people who will be most receptive and need to vote. It could be that we're looking for folks in high schools that are under-resourced for registration, so places where those students are not being registered to vote in their high schools. It could be that we're looking for community colleges where there's an under-resourced sort of nature for registration, where they don't have student groups, they have low turnout rates and low registration rates. So number one is targeting, and it goes differently depending on the program that we're running. And then once we've done our targeting, we'll hire folks. So we'll recruit young people we'll give them small cash payments. So for example, with our high school voter registration drives, we pay people $100 to run the drive, $150 for community colleges students. And we'll recruit folks usually through their guidance counselors, through career centers, but also through micro-targeted advertisements on Instagram, so that we can reach the exact students that we want in the places that matter. And then we'll pay them. I saw some questions in the chat. We pay them, fairly nominal amount, but for most of these students, it's quite a lot. Most of the places that are sort of disenfranchised from registration are poor areas where people can't afford to just volunteer their time to register voters, but need to be paid. And then we train our students. So if they're doing a physical drive, we'll train them. If they're doing a relational drive, we'll train them. And we support them throughout their work, whether it's through their registration work or their turnout work. And then we'll conduct the intervention, whether it's voter registration or voter turnout. And then we'll track the activity. So, we'll track voter registrations, we'll track, the actual amount that come in online and physically. And then when it comes to turnout, we'll track whether those people vote. We'll track the precinct data and other such things. So I want to just talk briefly about a couple of our initiatives that's coming up in Virginia and Pennsylvania, just to sort of zero in to give you a sense of what does a couple of our initiatives actually look like on the ground level. So our physical registration programs take place in high schools and community colleges in key districts. So in Virginia, we've worked with Jim to target the most key districts for registration in high school and community college. And in Pennsylvania, we've worked to target the key progressive counties, basically. So that's the targeting piece. We target in a nonpartisan way. We use the Target Smart Ideology Score, but basically these are progressive areas. So young people are going to be, sharing progressive values. And then we'll recruit students. So for high school, we'll recruit them through their guidance counselors. We found these initiatives didn't just sort of happen. For a couple years, we tried to figure out how can we register students in high school in the most effective way, because most are not registered. And we tried all sorts of different things. We hired organizers, we've hired community members, we hired teachers, and it was very unsuccessful. And the reason was because schools were resistant to registration drives. But once we tried the strategy of actually just hiring students, we found that schools no longer were resistant. All their criticisms disappeared once they found out that we were paying their students. And so we particularly reach out to guidance counselors who have their students' interests at heart very strongly. And that's how we get those students to do drives. When it comes to community colleges, it's very easy because colleges have job boards, unlike high school. So we'll just post jobs there. Then we'll train our students. So we train them on Zoom. We then send them all the physical materials they need to run their registration drive. And then we closely supervise their work through text communication. And then the students actually do these registration drives. So there's a number of formats. It can be tabling, it could be going to events, it could be high traffic canvassing, it could be going to classrooms. We allow students to choose the mechanism that will allow them to register the most students within their particular school environment. And then we'll collect data about the students we've registered. That way we can keep in contact with them so that we can remind them to vote when upcoming elections occur. And we'll track our results. So the students have to submit photos. We track their online links for registration and also their physical registrations. And this was a very successful program in early of this year. We registered, as I said, just under 16,000 students, $5.40 a registration. It's very inexpensive. And it's really, really very effective. And so we're excited to hopefully have the opportunity with your support to bring this to the key Virginia high schools and community colleges, as well as the key high schools in particular counties in Pennsylvania. So now I'll talk a little bit about our relational work. Again, this is one component of our work. And so we recruit a number of different groups of folks. We recruit high school seniors, we recruit community college students, and we also recruit low propensity young voters. And we recruit these folks to remind their friends to register to vote or to remind their friends to actually vote. And so we'll target key high schools. So we'll target first for registration. We'll target high schools where we can't do a physical drive for whatever reason. So we'll actually digitally contact the students through micro-targeted Instagram ads and reach out to them there. For community colleges, we'll target the same colleges that we've targeted before. And then we'll also target for turnout work, low propensity young voters. And we'll recruit those folks through a number of different mechanisms that I mentioned, micro-targeted ads, job boards, other venues. And then we'll train those students about how to remind their friends to vote and how we can track that or to register. And then they'll remind their friends either to register or to vote, depending on what the program is. And then we'll track those results. So that's sort of an overview of our work generally, but 2 particular initiatives that we would like to bring to Virginia and to Pennsylvania. And again, I really appreciate everybody's time and interest in what we're doing, and really especially all the activism that you all have been doing probably, or for many of you, probably your whole lives. And I think we're really only here because of that. So we're very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Zev. Wow, what an amazing presentation. I think a lot of online love. My name is Aaron Hamburger. I am the membership coordinator here at 31st Street, and I also am the Q&A fielder. So
Okay.
we'll do a little Q&A after our speakers come in. Just a couple of questions to kick us off. How does this actually work for the students who run TurnUp? Is it all volunteer? How do they have time with their college and high school, other
Yeah. That's a great question. We're a sort of, I would say, more a professional group. We have 7 full-time staff of all different ages. And so the administration of these programs is run, I mean, some people are recently graduated, but none of them are students, except for me. So it's sort of just like any other group, except that all of our work is with students. And so that the interactions that we have with students are, one through our internship program. So all of those folks on Zoom working together to participate in grassroots activism, and 2 through these sort of one-time programs where we're hiring particular students in very specific places to do registration or to do turnout or to do relational organizing.
Great. And what is your sort of, you have 7 on your permanent staff? Is that correct?
That's correct. And I would just add that it really changes. So it's very election driven rather than sort of other typical nonprofits. So, closer to elections, we'll work with a lot of part-time folks, and when we're building out projects. So it's very flexible. We found that to be very important. We've tried very different models over the past 3-4 years. And this has been what's really been most effective for us.
Great. Can you also tell us more about other states that you worked in? Besides, we talked about Pennsylvania and Virginia, but where else?
Yeah, so we've mostly worked in other places, actually. And so, what we're really trying to do is to bring our strategies into these key elections. For instance, we've never worked in a Virginia legislative election. We've never worked in a Pennsylvania off-cycle election. We've been very active in both Georgia special elections. We've worked within the 2020 and 2022 across a number of different swing states. So most of our work has been elsewhere. We worked earlier this year in Wisconsin on the Supreme Court race, made a big impact there. But it's only been this year that we've really started to get involved on the sort of off year. We've grown since 2021 quite a lot and have that opportunity and programs. So yeah, that's sort of our background.
And do Republicans also fund you? And I imagine you must register some Republicans.
Yeah, that's a great question. Almost never. I mean, so we obviously don't, we don't discriminate against anybody but we've never really found Republicans to be interested in TurnUp. I mean, we're a progressive group and we haven't found them to want to join. In fact, none of them have really ever joined our app. But we operate as a values-based group. And I think I did sort of see some flashes in the chat about nonpartisanship. So we're nonpartisan, but we have social justice values that guide our work. And so we use those values in order to determine, where should our impact be focused? And those are places that have been disenfranchised, young people of color, women, other young voters who are passionate about social justice. And we only use nonpartisan tools, for example, Target Smart's ideology index, in order to figure out where we want to work, and nonpartisan messaging and language.
And then are you connected or related to other groups who are doing this kind of work? One person in the chat mentioned David Hogg has kicked off a group like that. We're curious if you work with other groups.
Yeah, we work with groups in a number of different capacities. But I would generally say that what we try to do is things that other people are not doing. And to work in ways that make sense. So, for example, within our internship program, we don't create any of our own phone banks. We don't create any of our own text banks or canvassing events. We work directly with other C3s and send our young people to them and supervise their work so that we don't duplicate efforts. We don't work in high schools where there's already things going on that are working. We don't, same with colleges. So we very much focus on where can we make a marginal impact of significance rather than where can we just do something. But that has still led to a lot of very exciting partnerships. One that I would mention is a lot of our digital programs. We work with Feel Good Action, which is one of our partners on influencer marketing, and they really do a great job to help us out. David Hoag's group is more of a part. It's not a C3, so we can't really work with them. David is a personal friend of mine, and very excited to see what he's doing. But in that case, that wouldn't be something that we'd be able to collaborate on.
Got it. Another question that popped up: young people move a lot, so how can you follow them and make sure that they re-register in their new polling place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First, I would just comment on the re-registration, which is one thing that I didn't mention is we developed a tool in 2020 along with some students, some actual high school students that we worked with and hired to allow folks to re-register to vote when they went to a four-year college out of state, and so to be able to figure out where their vote actually makes the bigger impact, whether it's in their home state or where they go to college. We ended up re-registering 60,000 students in 2020 with this tool because it went viral in college group chats. Everybody was meeting online at that point before starting school, looking for something to do during COVID, and re-registering to vote was something that was appealing with the Trump election. So we have tools on that front. But what we've discovered is and again, we haven't, this has been 3-4 years. It's not been 10 years or 20 years. So we don't know, how young people will move and change as our generation ages. But we haven't really seen that to be something that has made a particular impact. Most of the young people we're working with are from places where they're very likely to stay in their home state at a minimum. They're also very unlikely to have their own address, except for the one that's at their parents' house usually. And so it takes a while for folks to move around and change. So that's something that we'll see probably more in the next few years. And that's why we have continued communication with all the folks that we register so that we're able to contact them, remind them to vote. But part of reminding them to vote and the tool that we use is to check and potentially update registration. So I think in the future, it'll become more significant, but so far it hasn't yet.
Okay, great. Couple more questions before we move on. And just to let everybody know, we do tend to stay on at 5 o'clock to answer more questions once the formal meeting is over. So you'll have a chance to ask those if they didn't get answered. But Zev, what do you find is sort of the major kind of roadblock or stumbling block to get people to register? I mean, I know you've talked about some of them, but once you're actually like in touch with these potential voters, what do you find is the key to kind of getting them to actually do this?
It's a very good question. We focus a lot on issues of importance, particularly reproductive rights and the possibility that will be ended, particularly in Virginia, as that ad mentioned. Also on climate change, on racial justice, on gun violence prevention. Those are very powerful issues. But usually that's really a very minimal factor. Young people want to register to vote. I mean, even if you look at some of the data, more than 75% of young people say they want to register, say they want to vote. It's something that young people are excited about. The problem is that their schools are not registering them. And that's, oftentimes it's a bureaucratic problem, but sometimes it's a political problem where folks don't want them to register. And so really, we found that it's very easy to register a young person once we're in touch with them. And we don't really spend time on folks who are not interested in registering because so many young people are, and there's so many that are not registered that would like to be, that's not been really a particular issue for us.
Great. Okay, one last question. A couple of people have asked, is there somewhere on your website where you have a link with information about your budget, income, expenses, that kind of information?
Yeah, we have that and be happy to share that. It's actually not on our website. We're working on adding it. The IRS, we published 990s, but our budget has only grown recently, so we only have like one that's been up. But the IRS doesn't publish them. They have taken like 3 years and backlogged on publishing stuff. So what we would like to do is be able to link to that, which is what we're supposed to do when it's published, but they still haven't published it, which is why we have a link directly to their site. But yeah, I'd be happy to share that.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much. And again, as I said, we will stay on after the formal meeting to answer anyone's questions that haven't been answered yet, but that was really wonderful. Now I'm going to bring on Mary Pence, who has a special message to share. Thanks again.
I want to take a moment to center us in time. My perspective is that we've come a very long way from 2016 when that man with the orange hair was elected. Slowly but surely, we've made significant gains in 2018, 2020, 22. And now we are poised on the cusp of the most consequential election of all, November of 2024. But today, August of 2023, in terms of the looming legal accountability of that man with the orange hair, we are exactly where we had hoped to be. So the wonderful Robert Hubble said this a couple of days ago. He said, they know. Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, Josh Hawley, Ron DeSantis, Kevin McCarthy, they all know that Trump is guilty. They know that he is a fraud and con man. They know he is a danger to the Constitution. Why does it matter that we know that they know? Because it frees us from wasting a single moment of anger or upset in response to their performative grievance. They know the truth and are attempting only to make it from one day to the next as the GOP crashes around their feet. They could walk away, but choose not to. That is their problem, not ours. So let's be grateful for the fact that the wheels of justice are finally beginning to grind away at Trump and not be distracted by the howls of protest coming from the GOP. We are winning. Let's accept that fact and move forward. So Jim and Zev have made the case for us that registering and turning out young voters in Virginia and Pennsylvania is where we should be putting our energy right now. With a tax-deductible, let me say it again, tax-deductible contribution to TurnUp. 31st Street is just beginning this effort. Jim tells us, or just put a note in the chat, that we've raised $23,000 toward our 100,000 goal. So we're almost a quarter of the way there, which is pretty amazing because we are just getting started. But we want to reach our goal quickly so that Zev can mobilize his people in Pennsylvania and in Virginia before or as the school year is getting underway. A couple of days ago, my husband Dan and I contributed $5,000 to this effort. And I want to tell you about something. When I pushed that button on the computer to send our contribution on its way, I had this physical sensation. It's hard to describe. Maybe peacefulness or calm or optimism. Strong and clearly discernible. So I invite you to create the opportunity for yourself to have the same physical sensation by clicking the link that's been put up in our chat and joining Dan and me in making a stretch contribution, whatever that is for you. And then when you've done that, take a moment to savor that good bodily physical sensation that will follow. You earned it and you deserve it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And thank you, everybody who have been donating for the last 45 minutes. Thank you very much. And Zev, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to come, and thank you for everything you're doing. I don't know how you're doing it while you're in college. I have no idea. But anyway, we're going to turn it over to Joanne now, who's one of our canvassing leaders, to talk about canvassing. And take it away, Joanne.
I just say thank you. Super quick. Sorry, Joanne. Just thank you very much for your generous support. It's really going to make a difference in this election and for our work. So very grateful. And Mary, thank you for your and your husband's support and really, really powerful comments. So thanks to everybody very much. I've really enjoyed getting to meet you, although digitally. and look forward to our continued engagement together.